This is the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and on each episode, I'm going to help you get savvy to allow you and your business to grow. We'll be focusing on the three elements that lead to business success: your mindset, your processes, and your skills. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. And I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and today I have a guest joining me to talk about a mindset issue around how to lead a team and the things to think about when you are transitioning into that new leadership role, which is really important. So I'm going to introduce my guest in just a second, but if you have any comments about what we're talking about, please feel free to add them, make some comments, like what we're doing, and obviously share and get anybody involved who you think might be interested in what we're talking about. The show's all about helping you, especially if you're new to a leadership role, how you can get the most from your role and also ultimately get the best from your team. So today I'm going to be joined by Kieron Hill. He is going to be talking to me about how to keep your distance. Not in a way where we're just going to run away, but actually keeping that safe distance, I think, from our team, so that we gain some respect and also allows us to operate from a position of distance. Remote but approachable is, I think, the right term. So let's bring Kieron in to introduce himself. Hi, Kieron.
Hi there, Mark.
How you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Good, excellent. So I've sort of introduced what we're going to be talking about. Before we're going to look at your motivations in a second about what drives you to do what you do. But first of all, just give us a rundown of what you do and why you think this topic is important.
Yeah, we're a HR consultancy for the real world. Basically, we're made up of consultants who've had large amounts of management experience, but have perhaps not spent as much time on HR. And we frame it very much around, if people are looking to learn to drive, they don't take lessons from somebody who's just done the theory test. They take lessons from somebody who's actually driven a car.
Yeah.
So as we have done management, and I've worked as a senior manager in a consultancy firm, that's where we're aiming the target at. And we're looking at companies that are just beginning to grow, just coming into maybe a fast growth stage in some areas, even under the current conditions, and helping them develop so that they actually can sustain themselves rather than rise and fall, as a lot of companies unfortunately do.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So we're going to get stuck into that subject in a topic about how we keep a little bit of distance from our team and why that's a good thing to do. Before we do that, though, we're just going to delve into a bit about why you do what you do. We're going to talk about those three top motivators that we see on the screen. So I'll just give an overview on what those three are. So your top motivator is the STAR. So that's you're driven for recognition, respect, social esteem. Secondly, searcher, doing something meaningful, purposeful, and making a difference. And thirdly, feeling you belong and you have fulfilling relationships at work. So how do you think those three at the moment are sort of showing up in what you do, Kieron?
Yeah, I filmed in this thing back in June, and as you know, I'd completely forgotten I'd done it. So when you revealed it to me, I thought, yeah, at least it actually looked fairly accurate. I suppose the top one, the one that I scored highest on, the STAR, is why I actually work for my own business. When I've worked in corporate life, you receive recognition from your peers, hopefully from the board, rarely from your own staff. And sometimes it's quite good when you're working directly with clients to get the feedback from them of how you've made their lives better. And that certainly motivates me, that if I have I've just been speaking to somebody this morning who started the phone call by saying, I'm just looking for someone to run away for 2 or 3 months, but I thought I'd phone you instead. She runs a dementia care home. You can probably imagine how difficult her life is at the moment.
Yeah.
And I get a real buzz from delivering that to people who are doing things, I think, in a community that are valuable. Sometimes the friend one is actually has a negative effect because I've got to be careful to maintain the distance. But I suppose it's about me learning what friends are. And friends aren't all the people that you would share anything with, warts and all. There are different levels of friendship. There are different types of friend. And I actually like to think of my clients as friends, but they're perhaps friends that I don't actually get too upset about if they disagree with me. They're friends who I'm quite happy for them to not be particularly keen on what I'm saying to them. So I don't invest my value in the relationship with them. And it's quite an interesting position to be in. Because I do have to remind myself sometimes, particularly with somebody I've got a very close relationship with, that when we don't agree on something, it isn't a personal issue. It isn't something I need to take away with me. Because at the end of the day, I am their advisor. I am not their father.
It's really interesting, actually, because that friend one crops up, and people, if it's at the bottom of their map, so in other words, it's saying the least important thing is those relationships. They sort of have an adverse reaction to that and saying, well, I am a friendly person. But actually, it's not about whether you're friendly or not. It's actually whether you go to work for those nurturing relationships or not, and whether it's important to you. So as far as you're concerned, it's about having a close-knit relationships with people that you work with, not necessarily the people, your clients, but actually people that are around you that are sort of supportive and you feel that you belong somewhere. Would that be right?
Yeah, it is. But belonging, I think, is key. I'm a social animal, and I have to belong where I am. If I don't, then I feel very uncomfortable, and that goes for anyone, whether it be in clubs that I'm a member of, whether it be at work, whether it be in the family. If I don't feel I belong, then I'm in a very uncomfortable place. So yes, it's key to be wherever I am.
Yeah, it's interesting. You had 2 relationship motivators in your top 3 as well. So it is really about, very much about connecting with people. And I suppose that's sort of really what you do is an important factor of understanding and helping people connect with others is a key part of what you do, isn't it?
Yeah, it's passing it on, and I don't think there is any right and wrong way with this. I remember a friend of mine who's a psychotherapist once explained to me, and it took me a while to accept this advice, that actually, just because I want to be a manager of a certain type doesn't mean to say that somebody who wants to be a different type of manager is wrong. It just means they will attract to themselves a different type of person. So a kind of more aggressive, maybe assertive Alan Sugar type character may well work in the industry they're in. There's no right and wrong on that.
Yeah.
Whereas they would probably be less effective in a caring environment, like a lot of our clients are, GPs, care homes, domiciliary carers, things like that. So there isn't right and wrong. It's just what motivates me.
Yeah, and absolutely right. So in context, it's what's right for you, and how you use them effectively in your role is important. And being aware of these things really helps, doesn't it? Whether it's this or psychometric profiling, all those sort of things just help us to understand ourselves a bit better.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, and I think it really leads on really well to what we're going to be talking about in the topic today, about keeping your distance when you get that in that role of leading, managing, whatever you want to call it. And we were talking about this before the show, not today, but another day. And it's interesting when we think about how people approach that first leadership role in particular, because they probably come from a team. And one of the things they don't realise is that they need to have that space, and really what they need to do is find their own new team as opposed to staying in that existing team that they're trying to manage. I think is that how you see things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are 3 main groups that provide people with their social interaction. There's family, there's the social environment that they mix in, whether it be a pub or a club or some other activity, and there's work. And work is a quite substantial part of the week. And if all of those 3 social environments are supportive to them, then they're generally happy. If they've got to a situation where one of them isn't being so supportive, they generally can get through it. But when 2 of them aren't supportive, then they're usually in trouble, and it's time to change something. So in my view, it's important when you take over a leadership role that actually you are almost stepping down the pyramid. And I was taught this visualization. By the way, nothing is original thought in mine. It's all learned from other people who are much cleverer than me. But when you go into a leadership position, it's actually good to visualize yourself as actually stepping down. You're not actually in charge. Your role is to enable people in the best way you can to do the best that they can. And from that position, you often get much better decisions because your ego isn't actually required in this role. Your ego can go and take a holiday somewhere else. That's a lot of the way I look at it. And also, you're looking at a collective. If you start to envisage the way you manage or you lead teams on the basis of individual decisions with individuals, then there will be differences between the way you treat different people, and that will lead inevitably to dissatisfaction amongst the team. So you have to look at things dispassionately on the basis of the whole team's interests rather than just one or two people.
I'm absolutely with you with that, and I sort of described it as actually put yourself in the position of you're working for your team as opposed to them working for you.
Yeah.
Same sort of analogy where I think it's an easier and sort of a more comfortable place to come from. In other words, what can I do for you as opposed to what can they do for me? It's very similar to what you've just said, just slightly different way of sort of framing it. And I think, understanding that if you come from that place of, serving your team, what can I do for you? Then, make sure they're doing the best they can and you're supporting them in that way. So then they can do the best work, which ultimately will free up their time.
Yeah. And also remember, you're setting the targets as well. So there is this slight distraction between you setting the target as the business owner and then your role as the manager of the people who are delivering it. But I think it's quite possible to maintain that kind of split personality because one takes place where you're making decisions on the part of the business and the other takes place in the social environment of work.
Right. Yeah. So to tell us some stories about maybe clients that have had, maybe this has not gone quite so well with regards to that first time that they've been put in a management role.
There's quite a few. I mean, there was somebody I once took over from when I was in corporate life who felt that he had to be everybody's best mate. And he'd go out for drinks with them and leave his credit card behind the till and say, go on, just get as many drinks as you want. And it clearly had favourites and otherwise within his team. When I took over, there was a clear split between the people, those who felt they were in with the manager and those who felt that they weren't. And getting cooperation between the team, which was absolutely necessary. They all performed a single function. If they didn't work together, the function didn't happen. It took some time for me to get my head around it, a couple of weeks, I think, where I actually spent time working with them on various projects, just seeing how the machinery of the department worked. But what I realised very quickly is that what I needed to do was to install some boundaries of behaviour within that team that may have been unpopular with the in crowd, so to speak, but to do it anyway because it gave a message that there were now boundaries and that they applied to everybody. Nobody was exempt, and that's the experience I learned purely by experience. What I have seen in some companies is where that social involvement gets to an extreme, you can actually get into some quite difficult situations. And I remember a client once phoning me, must have been about 4 days before Christmas. They ran a small engineering firm in the South Coast and nobody had turned in for work. It turned out that the managing director had gone out for a drink with everybody on Saturday night. And of course, at 10 o'clock, he was everybody's best mate, and they were all the finest people in the world. And by 11:30, he was in the car park dismissing them all for disciplinary offences of being all a shower of insert your own tweet. So I think to teach you a lesson, they all decided they would take that dismissal in the car park of the Dog and the Duck seriously, and they didn't turn up on Monday morning. So he was left an engineering firm with no employees.
We laugh, but actually that's quite a serious situation, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, as it was, these people clearly showed a level of maturity that wasn't present to the managing director, and had actually just gone to the cafe down the road for a slice of toast, and we're just waiting for it to turn up shamefaced before they all went gotcha and went back to work.
Right.
But yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah.
You know, when we get into those situations, we start behaving as if it is a purely social situation, and we forget that these people work together, and there are boundaries to that.
Yeah.
And quite rightly, there are some people who don't want you to interfere in their boundaries. They don't want you to interfere in their private life. It is their private life. I think we sometimes lose sight of that in what is fashionable about work-life balance and all the rest of it. Actually, some people like the separation. So it's about learning that as well.
Yeah. I've got a story about one of my clients, a newly promoted guy put in charge of a team who'd been part of that team for some time, promoted because he was the most sort of enthusiastic. But what I knew about him, because he'd done a motivational map, was that he had high friend. So I said to the MD, I said, look, he's great, he's got enthusiasm, I think he'd be great if you nurture him actually. But what you've got to remember is he wants to be part of something. He wants to feel that he belongs. So coming out and managing a team is not going to be, he's not going to get that from his team now. So he needs to understand or needs to feel that he's now part of the new management team. So you guys have got to make him feel as if he's part of the new team, management team now. What my concern was the rest, all of them, were spirit motivated. So in other words, they were driven by freedom. So they weren't tended to want to nurture and feel that belonging themselves. So I said, you've got to do something that's probably not natural to you to make him feel as if he's part of the team, and go out your way and check on him, make sure that he feels that he is part of your new team. Of course, they didn't do it. I how much time I told them, make sure he feels that he's part of your new team, the management team now. And ultimately he, started to flounder and ultimately left, which was really sad because he had potential, but it was because he just didn't feel as if he was part of the new team, and he was starting almost to feel that he wanted to be back part of his existing team that he was managing, and it was never going to work that way. So, however much you tell some people, they just don't want to listen because it's not something they want to do. But it's really important to understand what that, especially when they're new to a leadership role, understanding that's what they need. They want to feel belonging, and if they can't get it from the team they're leaving, then they've got to feel it from their new team.
Yeah, that's true. But also with that attitude, it means they've got to be careful about who they do put into management roles, because if they put the wrong person who doesn't fit with the way they want to operate as a group, then that is going to fail. But it's also true, I think, to make what could be dangerous assumptions about people's character. And having made several of them on my own, and been shown fairly quickly that I was making a dangerous assumption, there are people who perhaps don't come across as very clubbable, to use the slang word, who don't come across as very social. And to assume that therefore they don't need to feel as though they belong and they're part of the team. And I think that's quite wrong. I've worked with people who would probably be described these days as being on a spectrum, and so exhibited very few signs of sociability in the office. Clearly, the chit-chat just wasn't something that happened. But they were still keen to be part of a group. They still wanted to be part of something, even though they couldn't outwardly demonstrate that. I think it's important for leaders to recognise that, to recognise that not everybody is going to welcome you as your best buddy. And you've got to recognise people for the skills they've got.
Yeah. And I think also when you've just been promoted, the team tend to want to test you out, and they will do things just to see. I'm sure you've seen plenty of examples of that.
Oh yeah. I remember introducing a uniform policy to a department I'd gone into which got a lot of people really upset because they were all lawyers and nobody had ever told them how to dress before. It had the desired effect. It stopped me being the person they used to work with to the person they were now actually having to have as a boss. Right. An interesting emotional reaction for a couple of weeks. But surprisingly, large numbers of them actually came up afterwards and said, you did exactly the right thing. because it gave us a standard that we had to apply.
And isn't that leadership? That's what leadership's about. It's doing things that you feel uncomfortable about, but you actually know that it's the right thing ultimately.
Yeah, there's again somebody who taught me lessons rather than many years ago. I used to be full-time trade union official, and we sat in the annual meeting with the board of the company that we worked in, and the chief executive looked to one side. We've never argued about it. I can't even remember the subject now. And he said, "Look, as the leader of this organisation, I sometimes have to make decisions that I find deeply unpleasant. And in those circumstances, I have to weigh up whether it's the right thing for the company, because that's where my responsibility lies. And having weighed up that, if I've still got to do, and if the outcome is it has to be done, even if it is unpleasant, then I have a simple answer. If you've got to do something unpleasant, do it quickly. Because if you drag it out, all you're doing is torturing people. They all know what's going to happen. They all know which way to go. I've never yet come across a bunch of employees who didn't know a company was having trouble. They've always spotted the signs. And so he said, there's a very simple thing. Sometimes when you have to make decisions, make them quickly, be clear, be transparent, and don't try and flammer it past people who are very good at detecting deceit. And the moment they detect that deceit, you've lost them. I look back on that guy's advice, which is nearly 30 years ago now, and it was the best advice I've received from anybody, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. You know, to be honest about the situation. If you try and gloss it over, people just think, well, you're just trying to bury something that we already know, and being upfront and honest is the best policy. Yeah, definitely from my experience in many ways. So what's the top tips then for if you need to establish that sort of that distance, that remoteness, but obviously but also still remaining approachable? I suppose that's the challenge, isn't it? That remoteness and approachability.
I think keep your personal affirmation away from work. Keep it with your family. Keep it with your friends that you don't work with. I try and get out every weekend with my wife to get away for the day. We both work together as well. But for that point, we are family and we're out for the day. And that's important. That's where my real affirmation comes from. Because the moment that my personal value is only invested in work is the moment that my ego gets in the way of what I'm trying to do as a leader. And I think that's the top tip. Have something outside of work that you can rely on that will make you feel good about yourself. And even in some circumstances, when I was working for sort of fairly senior management role, I actually went to weekly yoga lessons just because it gave me that space in my head to feel good and not rely on anybody else for that I was working with. So whatever it is for you, it could be that, it could be again golf, could be going to see a football match, whatever it is, do it. And then also make sure that you are very clear, particularly with perhaps people who are friends, who have become your staff because you've been promoted, that they understand that the relationship will have to be slightly different. And make sure that they understand that. A guy I work with at a company called Peninsula, I sat next to him when I first arrived. He was a very kind and intelligent man, and I became his boss. And before I was his boss, we used to go to concerts together, we used to go out, we used to spend time together, and he was a great friend. But when I became his boss, he actually had the wisdom to come to me and say, look, this has to change. You know, we're still friends and I'll still back you up, but we can't continue in the way we have. And I think that honesty really shone through from it.
Yeah. And also we've got to remember that people are watching, we're always being observed, especially in a leadership position. And, you know, if your actions don't match what you're talking about, then, you know, straight away people are going to lose that respect, aren't they?
I think it is. We all talk about the 5 senses and which are the most important senses. I think the most important sense in a human being is the ability to detect deceit. It is probably the most highly tuned sense we've got. Yes, there are gullible fools out there. We know
Yes.
that, but most people spot when you're telling them a whole load of
Yes, that
SH1.
BS detector is quite
Yeah,
strong in many of us, even whether we admit it or not.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's there.
yeah, exactly. Great. Well, Kieran, time's flown by. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and so
Okay.
I just want to thank you for your time today. It's been a great fun, really important topic that obviously we've only skimmed the surface of, and
Yeah.
but if you listen to this and you need some advice, then reach out to either of us, and we can give you some guidance and set you on the right path. That's the ultimate thing. That if you start making the right decision at the right time, then you won't fall into the traps. Some of the traps that we've already mentioned, but there's many more that you could possibly fall into. So, Kieran, thank you again for your time today.
You're welcome.
And do you want to just mention where people can find you just before you go?
Yeah, but by all means, we've got a website, khes.co.uk, fairly simple one to remember, or they can contact us through that, or you can give me a call. I've got a mobile number, 07879 551 256. Happy to
Fabulous.
chat.
Fabulous. Great stuff. Right, I'll let you get back to more important things, client work and all that stuff that I'm
Yeah.
sure that pays the bills rather than sitting here and talking to me. So I will see you again very shortly. And again, thanks for your time today.
Okay. Thanks for asking me, Mark. Cheers now.
Great stuff. Well, I hope you found that useful. I certainly did. Even though I do sort of work that similar to Kieran, there's always stuff you can learn from other people, and experiences and the stories he's told resonated with me, and I guess they will resonate with you. So don't hesitate to get in touch with Kieran and also myself if either of us can help you in any way, especially when you're new to leadership. Set you on the right path. That's the important thing. So until the next episode, I hope you have a great time, great day, I should say, great time. And there is lots of other episodes lined up to talk about different leadership things that are important, those key things around mindset, the processes and skills that we use. And also, if you ever need any help, then please reach out. You'll see my website is at the bottom of the screen for that. And until the next episode, I wish you well and see you next time.